like, oh, sorry, did I start talking too soon? God,
No, go ahead.
like, I'll give you an example, like leaf blowers, if they want to ban the leaf blowers or whatever. Like at what point, is that too nitty gritty or outside the scope of a normal comp plan?
I mean, I guess that, sorry, go ahead, Ashley.
No, I say not necessarily. If there are nuisance concerns that come up within the process, you could certainly make that recommendation to look at those issues. You wouldn't necessarily detail out the details of that ordinance within your comp plan, but it could be a recommendation in the comp plan.
And in addition, Teresa, I guess these could be other action items to consider under the larger umbrella of, potentially conserving energy or, switching to renewable sources of energy, which are broader goals. But one of the suggested or recommended action items, would be this. So not necessarily nitty gritty.
Okay. Okay. I mean, I was going through and highlighting, the parts that I, that I thought I don't want to say more important, but points that I think that I wanted to kind of be aware. But yeah, I just started reading it about 20 minutes ago. So we don't need to address it necessarily now, but I do like some of their comments about a community gardening and a nature center and things. So
Pretty thoughtful. Yeah, some of them
Yeah.
are really thoughtful.
Yeah.
It's pretty comprehensive, I'll say that.
yeah, it is.
So
I'm
they
like,
did
maybe
a lot of
we should
work.
maybe we should just stamp comp plan on it and call it a day. Here's our comp plan. No, what are you kidding?
I mean, one more thing I'd add to it is about maybe plumbing and Eames had talked a bit about this during the last meeting. And utilities, but I can reach out to him and talk about it and add it potentially to this.
What was the first thing you said?
Plumbing, infrastructure, and
Okay.
plumbing.
Okay. Yeah, I'm on the environmental committee. And they talked about writing something up, and I basically told them to get it to us so that we had it for today. But anyway, so yeah, and again, some of it we already have, like talk about the bicycle use and things like that. But they definitely do. They did their homework. They're a very thorough group. Okay. Okay.
Is there anything that the Parks and Rec group has as well? Because I know they were very engaged also during community facility.
No, I guess I should reach out to them. Although I think one of the women that's on that is on this committee too. But I don't know that the committee wrote anything up. But I can certainly make sure they know that they can if they want to.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, so now I will let Ashley do what she needs to do.
Sure. Do we have a forum yet? Looks like
We have Rick Picola's online, Jane's online.
Yeah, Eric's on his way up to town hall
Okay,
as he had to go up there anyway. So yeah, just Rick and I here, and actually Mr. Mandel is observing as well.
okay. So we've got 4 out of our committee of 7. Yeah, we've got a forum, so we can start.
Okay.
Yeah, Eric should be there shortly, I would think.
Okay.
So first item on the agenda is just to approve the minutes from the last meeting. I believe the minutes were circulated back in December. I have hard copies here for everyone, but I think they're also on the website already, so
It should be.
if there's
Yeah.
any.
well, I certainly read them because I made some proposed changes, so I was good with them as changed.
Okay,
I second.
okay, great. All in favor?
Favor? Aye.
All right, so minutes are approved. So next item on the agenda is the draft comprehensive plan. So again, at the last meeting, we had an outline that was circulated. We didn't really get a chance to go through it. I don't know if everyone has their digital copy, otherwise I can pull it up on the screen. That's probably the easiest way to do it.
Yes, it would be great if you could pull it up on the screen.
things I'm gonna want to share.
Now, I don't think we shared, Allison, did we share the environmental committee with all the members of this committee or just with, okay,
No, I
that's good.
wanted them to digest it and maybe
Yeah.
come up with the
Gotcha,
point.
gotcha.
Okay, so this is the outline. It follows a fairly typical comprehensive plan outline in that we're gonna start with a chapter 1 that goes through the introduction and project overview. It's a very high level of what is a comprehensive plan, how is it used. It has a brief summary of the 2003 comprehensive plan. And then it'll go through whether or not those items were addressed and how they were addressed. We go through a project history and planning process, the vision and goals. So there were some revisions to the goals that Lisa and I have been working, and Allison have been working on. The temporary, I'll call it the temporary final version, is now posted on the town's website. There is still opportunity for those to be amended further as we continue through the process, but those are posted now. This would be followed by chapter 2, which is going to start with an existing conditions section that'll go through in detail the existing land use policies, the result, some of the high-level results from the community survey, the existing housing types and patterns, and then that'll interspersed within that will be a variety of GIS maps. So the land use map, the zoning map, natural resources, community facilities, and open space. So this is really setting the existing conditions of the town. We're also going to do a deep dive into the zoning, and we actually have drafted most of this. We're still formatting it. I'm going to pull it up in a little bit and just go over some of the sections, but I don't want to circulate it to the whole team until it's more refined. And then we'll have the land use vision, goals, and objective section. And that is where we're taking a look at what we found in this analysis and what we've heard from the public. And we're coming up with specific recommendations on the future land use map for the town, as well as specific zoning revisions. I do have a memo that has very high level recommendations for a variety of things based on what we found in the zoning code. I will be pulling that up shortly as well and distributing that to the team. The next chapter is going to be community character and historic resources. We'll be focusing on the existing historic districts within the town and the hamlets, coming up with community character recommendations. That could be touching on things like design guidelines, whether or not the existing historic preservation regulations within the town are adequately serving their purpose, if there needs to be any refinement there, and implementation strategies. The next chapter would be transportation, mobility, and parking. So again, we're going to start with existing conditions, looking at things like existing infrastructure with sidewalks, bike lanes, roads, discussing existing traffic conditions and planned improvements, and identifying the existing public transportation resources. That will then be followed by the vision and goals and objectives. So the things that we've identified throughout this process so far, there is a desire for more bike lanes, improving mobility. We've heard a lot of comments from the public about traffic concerns, especially on Route 303. So we'll have some strategies for that. And then just generally within the code, whether some of the parking demand and supply, if the ratios need to be adjusted, if we need to look at some other methodologies that could be recommended by the comp plan. Chapter 5 would be economic development and downtown revitalization. So we'll go over the existing demographics and socioeconomic conditions within the town. How we do have some more current data now because they did just complete the 2020 census. So we'll be able to do some comparisons over how the town has grown over the last 10 years. We pulled the ESRI market conditions data, which is gives you a profile of how what the economic demographics of the town are. We'll bring that into the report. And then we'll identify some visions, goals, and objectives for the future. The next chapter is open space and recreation, sustainability, green infrastructure, and climate resiliency. Again, it would start with the same pattern of existing conditions, describing the existing open space and recreational facilities, existing sustainability and green infrastructure measures, and some of the existing hazards that have been identified through the process. Things like climate change, where there's been instances of flooding and things of that nature. That would be followed by the open space goals and objectives. And this chapter is really going to be led by Sachi, so I don't know if you want to jump in at this point, or I'll just continue going through.
One of the things that I think I want to add here, that this may end up being like part A and B of the chapter, because open spaces are, inherently something that we want to discuss in the light of usability and accessibility and people, so it's really, informs sort of the community facilities. And as part of the overall larger umbrella of community facilities. So we want to talk about open spaces and recreation in that context, which is a little bit more people-centric. And the environmental, the sustainability component is really, focusing a lot more on the environment, as we've received feedback from the environment group, and on future climate goals. So subtopics of that would include strategies in green infrastructure, or strategies for preservation of natural land, and other strategies for decarbonization, or renewable energy. So all of those would be subcategories. So again, thinking about this chapter more as two categories, one more people-centric, and one a little bit more focused on the environment and climate change.
Thank you. And then the last chapter is basically the wrap up. That is the next steps, action items, and implementation. So we'll have a summary, which will likely be in a table that highlights all the recommendations from all the preceding chapters and identifies short, medium, and long-term recommendations and how those would be implemented. So it could be going after grant funding to implement a Main Street revitalization, whatever the case may be. It could be, especially in the land use chapter, the steps for updating the zoning code. And those could be, maybe we want to tackle some of the low hanging fruit first, and then the longer, more in-depth revisions could be a medium term. But all those things will be prioritized in a table that's easy to digest as a sort of your checklist of what you want to do as a town going forward. So any questions on the overall outline?
Nope, not for me.
Okay. Stop sharing for a second. I'm going to pull something else up. Too many windows open. Hold on a second. So before I open up the draft comp plan, I want to show you an example of a comp plan that we recently did in the town of Stamford, because this is basically the graphic design look that we're planning on implementing for this plan. So this is a plan we recently did in another town, but this is the general format that we're planning, the visual format that we're planning on implementing here. The idea is that it would be very graphic heavy. We're going to use a lot of photographs. We start off with an acknowledgements page, table of contents, the introduction and overview. And then you can see here how we would integrate the photos into the page, into the document. We're going to do call outs to sort of highlight where the key issues are. We'll call out the goals and objectives in a graphically friendly and easily readable way. Scroll down. We'll include the various land use maps and identifying important areas within the town. So this is I don't need to go through the whole thing, but this is generally how it would flow. I guess at this point, if there's any questions about this general type of layout or format, we were thinking that we would develop it as a document that could be both printed and used as a web-based document, so that we wouldn't have pages bleed from one to the next. So it'd be easy to print out if you needed to print it out in-house. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that at this point.
I mean, I like the just going to the appearance or whatever. These documents can be very dry, I think, unless you try to bring some color and life and photos to them. Like I said, so I like the format,
And we'll also be bringing in the graphs like we had in the other. As well. Okay, so that's the general layout of what we're going to be pursuing.
Is this something you can make searchable for the final product?
Yeah, so we'll produce it as a PDF. So you would be able to word search the PDF, and we can do it. We can set it up with bookmarks and tabs, so it's easier to find different sections.
That would be great.
I mean, actually, just so you know, I think Stefan Muno was on here as an attendee, right? He's on the committee.
Well, I guess for Jim Dean. I
Yeah.
tried
So,
to-
so he's just, I mean, not that just for attendance purposes, he's here.
Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so here's where we start laying out the this proposed plan. We haven't developed the cover yet, so that'll be coming. We've got the table of contents. So introduction, very high level, goes through what is a comprehensive plan, how do you use the comprehensive plan. Like I said, we haven't inserted all the photos yet. So I'm going to wait to circulate this until we've inserted the photos, but one of the things I did want to go over with the team today is we have a summary of the last comprehensive plan, the topic areas that were the topic areas, the recommendations, and the outcomes. Some of the things we weren't able to find if they had been done or not, just based on our research. So we wanted to check with you to see if you recall anything was done. One of those items is the Spark Hill Creek area. There was the creation of a Spark Hill Creek Greenway path. I know that there's a bike lane near there. We weren't sure if that was that or if it was something else.
There definitely is I don't know if there is a sustainability committee or something, right, Allison? What's the name of that group? There's a 303, I'm sorry, there's a Spark Hill Creek
Yeah.
Sustainability Committee or something that is in existence. Actually, one of the members on the environmental committee is involved in that. I could get more detail from him about, I don't know that they did a study, I don't know, but there is a committee together, put it that way. I think they did do some kind of study, but I will double check.
Okay,
They did have a draft plan that I did send you.
yes, I got that.
Yeah.
Maybe the easiest thing for me to do would be to export this table into a memo, and then we can just circulate it and
Yes.
see if we're correct or if there's anything that we missed. So that's that. The next section, we did do a deep dive into the zoning. So the next section is the land use zoning chapter. We did do a very deep dive into the existing land use character, existing conditions, identifying the various patterns within the town. And then we did a deep dive into the zoning code itself. Sorry, I hope I'm not making anybody too dizzy. One of the things
The
that
zoning code does that without you even moving it, so don't worry.
one of the things that we noticed in going through the zoning code is that it's very difficult to easily figure out, what the district is and what's allowed in that district, and then what the dimensional regulations are in that district. So one of the things that we would recommend is simplifying it so that you can reduce the number of tables and have an easy reference in the back of the code so that it's easier to figure out, what's allowed where and how big can it be.
Welcome to my daily night.
Exactly. I was just saying, I can hear Jane clapping already. I mean, I've been here for
And
20
Rick.
and Rick, I've been here for 25 years, and that code from the day I started trying to figure it out, I'm like, what in God's name were these people thinking? I guess maybe when it started, it wasn't that many, but it's just kept going. But like in this zone, you could do this and go back to that. So, I mean, absolutely 100%. If we can simplify that, we've accomplished a lot. So.
Yeah, and then I'm gonna pull up a memo in just a sec, because I did put all this into an easier bulleted memo that I will email out to everybody after this call. Second. Okay. So in doing that, in doing that simplification, one of the things we noticed was that there's a lot of overlap in some of the zoning districts themselves, where there's not a clear difference between like the LIO and the LO. There's just some very small changes between those districts. So I was wondering if the town had any interest in, as part of the simplification process, merging some of those zoning districts into one, so that you have fewer zoning districts. And then instead of having maybe you can rely more on some special permit type uses and have specific performance regulations for those uses. You have some of those in your code already, but maybe that would be a way to make sure that you're getting the extra buffers and other nuisance protections that are coming up. As we're hearing a lot of concerns about noise and odors, especially like in the Route 303 corridor, if that was something the town would be interested in looking at further.
I think we have to look specifically at each one of those districts and where they are actually located within the town before there would be a decision to merge them.
Okay.
But I do know what you mean. Like sometimes when you're looking at the two zones, like, okay, you almost have to look to find what the difference is. Like,
Yeah, it just seemed like a lot of them had very similar uses. And
I mean, I agree with Jane. We don't want to say, oh yeah, let's just combine them without knowing the unintended consequences, but yes.
Right. So the biggest thing would be the uses permitted by right.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that I would be most concerned about, that if we merge it, what happens?
Yeah.
Because warehousing is specific to a certain zone, and that is the biggest concern with a lot of the residents in the town. So if we could, obviously take a closer look at those before any decision is made.
Okay, so I think as we keep going into this, what we can do is map out where the ones where we think there's potential for merging, so it's more clear, and then we can have a more detailed discussion on that point specifically. Actually, following up on that, I know we've reached out to Rockland County a few times now to see if we could get their GIS shapefiles for the zoning map. I'm not sure if anyone's had any luck with that yet.
Would that be Rockland County Planning?
Yes.
I mean, I haven't tried. I could certainly, if you give me who you.
I know Jane reached out a couple times, but it was also around the holidays, so it may have.
Okay. Well, I'll let Jane tell me who she was dealing with or trying to deal with, and then if I need to follow up, I'll follow up.
Okay, thank you. One of the other recommendations is to update the allowable uses and definitions to recognize uses not previously contemplated and assign appropriate for performance standards where applicable. So obviously the uses that are identified in the code right now, a lot of them haven't been updated since the 60s. It's time to go back and see what new uses should be added, if any uses should be split into two different definitions, and then add any appropriate performance standards if it's something that should really now be a special permit use or conditional use permit use instead of a permitted principal use. We heard a lot of comments during the public engagement on the Route 303 overlay district, that it was confusing, that there was issues with enforcement, that too many variances were being granted. So we are recommending that that district be revisited and updated as necessary to address those concerns. Specifically the nuisance regulations. And I think this is broader than just Route 303, but things that are regulations to improve residents' quality of life. So this, the leaf blower falls into this category. Increasing minimum buffer requirements between commercial and residential uses. That could be adding a provision in your code that where a commercial district abuts a residential district, you have an increased buffer requirement between the commercial property and the residential property. That could be a general provision within your code that could then be applicable to wherever that instance occurs, just as an example. Reviewing existing noise, light, and odor regulations. We looked at your tree preservation ordinance, and it hasn't been updated in, I think, over 30 years, maybe 40. And one of the things we noted is that it only regulates trees on public property. It doesn't seem to regulate trees on private property.
Can I just jump in here? I think there must be another section of our code that's because I can almost swear that in my time here, which is less than 30, not by a lot, but that we did something with cutting trees, like a clear cutting, or you can only cut so many, or Jane, do you know, is there something, either maybe it's in the development section or whatever, there's something that we did about you can't.
There is a provision that based on the size of the lot, that you can't take down any trees without getting planning board approval. And that was done to basically curb developers from clear cutting a lot.
Yeah, so
then
maybe it's
coming
in
in and getting
It's
approval.
in the zoning
And there is
section.
a shade tree.
and maybe it should be combined somehow with our, whatever, but we that's another thing you'll find in our code, was that something was added and it seems to be in a different section when they should be together. So like you said, you
Okay.
read that and you don't
Right.
realize. So yeah, there could be some consolidation, whatever you want to say, about in that area too. And it's just because I remember dealing with it at some point.
Right,
Okay.
so Teresa, you're correct, and I think it really needs to be addressed even on a regular single-family lot as to how many trees you can take down. Because if you go in a regular single-family lot that conforms to zoning, they could go and take down 10 trees if they want. And that is a major drainage issue when they do something like that. And when you have that happening over and over again, it's adding, and as you know, Teresa, we have a lot of drainage issues, especially in Pearl River. And we don't have a limit on impervious coverage. So people can just do whatever they want. And this is just added over the years to our flooding issues. So those are two things that definitely need to be looked at.
Yeah. Well, I know the people from South Nyack have raised concerns. I guess theirs is even maybe the complete opposite. You cannot cut down any tree unless you get permission. So maybe there's something in between what they have and what we have that, works.
Yeah, a lot of times codes, the zoning section of the code will have a provision that if you have an active development application before the planning board, you can't cut down any trees. But what a tree preservation ordinance could be redesigned to do would be to, any trees over a certain diameter of breast height would need to have an administrative permit to take down. And then
Right.
maybe have some provisions for a one-to-one replacement for the trees. And if you don't have a spot on your property that can accommodate that, you could have a tree fund, and that fund could be used to plant trees on public property somewhere else. That's what some towns have done. So that's something we can look into more and come up with some specific recommendations that sort of try to hit that happy medium.
Yep. If there's such a thing that exists, yes.
Well, yeah, I mean, if everybody's a little bit happy and a
Yeah.
little bit satisfied,
Right.
you're probably there.
I know Montebello has a very strict tree ordinance.
Okay.
If you wanted to take a look at theirs.
I just want to also note because I know we're being recorded, that our newly elected councilman, Brian Donahue, is on an attendee here. So just because he will be eventually dealing with some of these issues, I just wanted to acknowledge that he's here, and hope he's paying attention, because all these issues are going to come to the board at some point, so.
So the other, so you do have like a water course protection ordinance within your code, but it doesn't specifically address wetlands. So that was another item that we thought maybe something the town may want to add as a wetlands protection ordinance. We are suggesting to review all of the special permit and conditional use permit standards and update as necessary to review the current uses and concerns, in particular, the standards for warehouses and distribution centers, because those are something we heard a lot about during this process so far. Developing a steep slopes and ridgeline protection ordinance. This came up at one of the public workshops. So making sure that we're not causing drainage problems with impacts to steep slopes, as well as protecting the views and not like clear cutting on the top of a ridge.
Yeah, so let me just jump in there. We do have a critical environmental area, which I think sometimes, again, people underestimate, I guess. I don't know, because I was at a meeting in Piermont and they started, whatever, I don't know, talk, because unincorporated Orangetown is above Piermont, and they were kind of beating up on Orangetown. And thank God one of the planners that does work for us and them jumped in and said, no, we have a critical environmental area in our code, and that it's, that we do everything we can. So again, I don't know if it's in a different part of the code, and sometimes people aren't aware of it, but
It
again,
looks like it's mapped to Upper Grandview. Is it
Yeah,
beyond?
yeah, Upper Grandview is kind of the whole ridge that's above the villages. So above
Yeah,
Piermont, above, Grandview on the Hudson, that's the unincorporated section. And it's basically mountain and whatever. But so yeah, maybe there's other areas that we could consider it, but yeah, just don't want to let it be known that we do have that
Right.
to some extent already.
So right now, no land disturbance is permitted in the critical environmental area without planning board approval. They are permitted to file for a permit to remove trees up to 6, depending on the location on the property. Or if we're uncomfortable with it, we can send them to the planning board for tree removal, depending on if it's a very steep slope or something like that, we can send them. But any type of construction, driveway reconstruction, pools, houses, decks, all of that has to go to the planning board right now.
Okay.
Which is then, that initiates the review also by our town engineer.
is there a desire to bring, maybe not that's those exact same standards, but some other provisions to other parts of the town where there may be steep slopes and view sheds?
Yeah, I mean, especially, yeah, I would say yes, just in
Okay.
general, but now that South Nyack is going to be coming underneath eventually at ours, that's a whole nother project. Under our, I'm sure we're gonna have to incorporate, but they definitely certainly have those types of areas.
Right, so we'll also have riverfront properties in South Nyack, which right now, the unincorporated part of Orangetown does not deal with the riverfront properties. That has always been the villages. So that's a new thing for us.
Okay.
Because we don't have enough to do.
And just actually speaking of South Nyack, in the introduction chapter, we do acknowledge that South Nyack is becoming part of the town, and we mentioned the dissolution of the village, and that the land use regulations will then fall to Orangetown once that goes through. So we are including that within the comp plan. So next was to develop design guidelines for facade signage and streetscapes to preserve, protect, and enhance the unique characteristics of each hamlet. We did go through the Pearl River study that was done. It looks like there was some TOD zoning language proposed a couple of years ago, but I couldn't find evidence that it was adopted.
No, it fell off the cliff, with you. Yeah, no, it never did. It got to a certain point and whatever. It was just a political whatever. It just
Okay.
kind of stopped. So interesting. I mean, it definitely and part of when I was running for office, I was asked a lot about it. And again, there's some people that were so against it. Part of it, I just think, was calling it TOD. It was like they were hung up on the transit part of it versus just part of a revitalization and maybe, you know, whatever. But I think it should be part of a comprehensive plan. I didn't think meant necessarily pulling it out and doing it separately. It kind of made it, I don't know, more than it was. But interesting, just because I was reading the governor's latest in her state of the state, you know, one of the things she's talking about is requiring, I'm going to say forcing accessory dwelling units on all municipalities. But she also has something there about TODs and forcing municipalities to have a not basically that we would not be able to say no if it was already residential within a certain distance, so many unit, whatever. So I don't know what's going to happen with that. We're all fighting it being imposed on us, but it's just something to keep in the back of our minds when we're looking at this, that, you know, something that may be coming one way or the other. So we might as well take control of it.
So there were some design guidelines within that original law. So I guess the question is, should we revisit that and try to figure out which were the things that had more support?
Yes.
Just pull those out?
Yeah.
Okay. We can go back through the minutes of those meetings and see what was more supportable.
You know, I don't know that a lot of people took the time to understand it. I think they just heard TOD and more housing units and just panicked. You know, I don't think people, you know, because I know our density numbers were much less than I think even what Clarkstown has done. They did it in Nanuet.
Yeah.
But I know part of the concern is what they did right in Park Ridge down the road from us. I mean, literally Park Ridge is probably a couple miles down the road. And what they did was horrific as far as I was concerned. I mean, their density was whatever. So I think people had that in their mind that that's what we were looking to do. And I don't blame them. That was horrible. But so anyway, I think it's a matter of understanding what that density level looks like. Going back to pictures. Some of us are more picture people. And I use as an example, the town board had approved so it was a commercial building. They approved two levels of apartments above it and in Pearl River, and it looks beautiful. Like, I mean, it looks, I think people, if they see that, they can understand that's what we were talking about. Not high-rise buildings, you know, nothing crazy. It looks really nice. So that can give people a visual of what could be elsewhere in the downtown area.
This next recommendation, establish performance standards within the town zoning code to mitigate traffic impacts. This is something that we've done in other towns, and basically it sets thresholds for what is a traffic impact and when a traffic study is required. And if something has an unmitigated impact, it would not be allowed to go forward. The next section is to update the zoning code to include design guidelines and protections for rural and scenic roadways. This was something that we heard through the public engagement process. And lastly, to review the flexible and conservation subdivision regulations. So if there are any, I know that the town is fairly built out. There aren't a ton of large properties left that have the ability for further subdivision, but where there are, you could encourage the clustering of those units closer together so you can have a preservation of a larger tract of open space. So those were the overall zoning recommendations that we are looking to flush out more within the comp plan chapter. So I guess I was just looking for, there were any of these that don't really resonate, we should take off the table, or there were any that are like, yes, we really need to do that. Just starting to balance that out.
Well, speaking for myself, I think changes to our code to make it more user-friendly and consolidated, if you want to say whatever, needs to be looked at. But I agree with Jane, we have to kind of know what we're doing before we just go. I know we talked about it and you didn't use it here, but I guess maybe when you say flexible, there was a word, I don't know, that I know we, the zoning where it's like not about the use, but about there was a name for it, you called it like.
Form-based code?
Yeah, form-based code. Again, I have a concept of what that is in my head, but it's just something, I guess simplifying, is the word I'm ultimately, our code. I mean, right now, it's, look, as an attorney and I worked with the town for all these years and I still always question myself on certain things. And that's why Jane's always left with making this interpretation, which could go either way. And so we rather avoid some of that or make it where, she can make the interpretation. So.
Form-based codes are interesting because it does give you basically the box and then it sort of, you're designing the streetscape and you're saying, this is the size box you can have. These are the design guides that go with that box. And then it's a little bit more flexible on the use that's within that.
Yeah.
But they can be a little bit harder to understand if they're not done well.
Okay. Well, I mean, in my mind, I'll just give you an example, and maybe it's something different than saying form-based, or maybe it's something form-based within certain, maybe you can have it within certain sections, whatever. But for example, across the street from me here is it's like shopping, it's like office space on the bottom, and then, I'm sorry, office on the top, and then underneath it, there's like restaurants and a doctor's office and whatever. And so we had a pharmacy that wanted to come in, which would have been a perfect fit there. You had a doctor's office. Meanwhile, there's a restaurant, there's 2 restaurants, and the pharmacy didn't meet the code. And it was like, then we started looking at, again, going back to your point, LO, it could go across the street, in a L, whatever, I don't know what zone it was, but it couldn't go there. So it seemed silly to me. It was completely compatible with what's there. It wasn't going to change, the size of the building wasn't going to change whatever. It was, again, you look at parking, there's plenty of parking. We have that whole side parking lot. But that's the kind of thing in my head where I'm thinking the form-based code.
Okay.
If that makes sense. And maybe,
Yeah, I think that issue could probably be dealt with either a traditional code or a form-based code. I think that really speaks to the outdated use
Code.
tables.
Yeah.
And
I think one of the things that I, would love to add here is that form-based codes, may tend to become a little unwieldy because they really speak to architectural standards quite a bit. So maybe what could help in this case, Teresa, would be bulk standards, just simple bulk standards, which, define more than just the volume of the building, and use standards. You can actually just outline areas and say, these uses are compatible and permitted in these places. So just by, looking at those 2 things, which can easily fit with the existing zoning code, instead of introducing another form-based code, could, do that.
Yeah, I don't have any.
So bulk and use can help with that.
Okay, perfect.
I have a question. Can you provide an example or a few examples of municipalities that are already developed that may have adopted a form-based code? It seems to me that a form-based code is good for a more rural community that is beginning to.
Yeah, no, I think that was just something that had been mentioned to me. And I, again, it sounds like there's other ways of dealing with it without changing your whole code.
I like the idea of the form-based codes in that it does give some architectural guidelines. We don't have that anywhere in our code. So it does become, we've gone through it with the sign ordinance. So to have some type of guidelines, especially for the hamlets, I think that is a good direction to go in, because then it gives us, our boards, something to really rely on to develop. And when somebody comes in to start renovating, because again, these areas are already built up. So I think it's almost sort of got to be a combination of not only the bulk requirements, but also looking at some overlays and how we can make the design decisions more cohesive.
Yes, so
Okay.
a true form-based code, the city of Newburgh has one. And then I think Portchester has one as well. I've worked on some more like hybrid codes in the town of Southeast as an example for specific corridors, like the Route 22 corridor and the Route 6 corridor, where we identified, for example, every use was either a special permit use or a conditional use permit use, and then we had specific performance metrics that any new building going into that district needed to meet and specific design guidelines. So that's a little bit more of the hybrid approach, where
Okay.
you are having a clear table on, these are the dimensional regulations and these are the uses that are allowed, but you still have to hit X, Y, and Z to be able to go here. And it gives you, as the reviewing agency, a little bit more oversight in what is ultimately going to look like.
So the Route 303 overlay district was designed to do that. And while the intention was good, all the properties were existing. So almost anytime they come in to upgrade the commercial properties along the Route 303 corridor, they end up having to get variances from that section of the code from the ZBA.
Okay,
So if we're going to move forward with something like that, we have to really look at what regulations that we might put into that code and make sure that they're realistic.
yes.
Because the Route 303 overlay district. the
And
way-
you know what? When they were doing that, I remember them doing it. I used to say that it was the yellow brick road. They used to think it was yellow brick road. They were like talking about Route 303. I'm like, have they not been down there? Like they had these visions for Route 303. And I was like, they think it's like the Oz. We're in Oz land. It's probably, because I agree with you. It was so developed already. And some of the criteria were just, unrealistic unless somebody came in and really knocked everything down and started from scratch. And so, yeah, I agree on that front.
Right, because the existing site development restraints are too restrictive for the developer to implement what the Route 303 overlay is asking for. And it's cost prohibitive.
Okay, so it was probably a situation where they wanted you to put the parking in the back, really bring the building towards the roads, and then when you're dealing with an existing structure, it doesn't always makes sense.
Exactly. You exactly got it right on the head. That's
Right.
exactly right.
Yep, I've seen that as well.
I added
In that
two
case-
examples in the examples that Ashley spoke about in the chat. And I think they do, call out some of these issues that you're talking about, which include like building placement, the front setback, exactly where it would be placed, whether the facade's gonna have, certain features, shingles or awnings or things like that. So both of them, to different degrees of detail, they deal with that. And the examples that you requested can be found online.
So in terms of like going back to the Route 303 question, it sounds like maybe a form-based code wouldn't be the best for that, and that's something more along the lines of design guidelines, so that to give the boards more flexibility with the placement, to allow a little bit more infill, but not the expectation that everyone's going to go back to start from scratch on and redeveloping a
Right.
site.
Right.
Okay. Yes, if you're going for frequent variances, that's usually an indication that that section of the code needs to be revamped. So next on the agenda is to set the timing of the community workshop 3. My thought was that we should push this out a few months so that we have something more developed for the public to respond to, especially having things like a future land use map, maybe some conceptual use tables and bulk tables, so that the town, the community has an opportunity to weigh in on some of those specifics. So maybe more like April. And Sachi, I don't know if you had any thoughts about that.
I agree. I think that because we're still in the stage of, developing preliminary recommendations, I think having all of them ready, but not, 100% complete, and then taking it to the community, and based on our timeline, we should be done with it. I believe sometime during the 3rd week of April. So I was thinking, the week between 16th, I don't know, 18th is actually Easter Monday. So 19th of April or 20th of April is what I was thinking. But, that 3rd week of April or the 4th week of April, what I had in mind. And then that would give us a month after the community meeting to incorporate those comments before, finalizing the comp plan. Is that the timeline? By the end of May, Ashley? Or less finalizing the comp plan by the end of May?
Yeah, that's the target. Things got a little shifted. We had some of our initial workshops a little later than originally planned, but yes, the target is to have the full comp plan drafted by late spring so that we can start finalizing it and getting into the public hearings.
Well, those dates are all good with me. So whatever you guys works for you.
So in terms of the last week in April, it sounds like because of Easter and school holidays, there's probably going to be people away the 3rd week. Yeah. So probably the week of the 25th would be best. During that week, I can do either Tuesday.
Well, Tuesday we have a town board.
Yeah,
Oh, you have a town board meeting. Okay. Do Wednesday or Thursday work?
27th and 28th both work for me at the moment. 28th is actually preferred Thursday.
I have meetings on the Thursday night. Wednesday night works. What are we talking? 7 o'clock? Is that what time we were talking?
Yes.
Okay, so I could probably do it. I have a 6 o'clock meeting, but they don't usually go past 7, so should be fine.
Okay.
If that
So
works better for Sachi, I'll make it work.
28 is okay.
I thought it was the 27th.
Which date were you?
Doing Thursday, the 28th,
Oh, okay, Thursday's fine.
Oh, Thursday.
Versace, because she said that's. What?
Okay, so Thursday, the 28th at 7 o'clock. And then the next CPC meeting date. I'd like to do that at either the 16th or the 23rd, whichever works best for the town.
Well, we'll have the same conflict on the 23rd. So
Okay.
for Eric, Rick and myself, the 16th would be better because we don't have PRC on the 16th.
Okay. Okay, great.
16th of
Wait, you don't have it? Oh, wait, what was the date?
The 16th of February for the next CPC meeting?
Jane, we have that, you have the PRC meeting.
Yeah, I'm looking at our schedule.
Oh,
I don't know if the actual calendar, the town calendar's been updated, but our PRC meeting is February 9th and again on the 23rd.
oh, okay. So
This is
February,
up on it, Allison.
What?
We added the PRC meetings to the actual application sheet. So if you wanted to, it's on the town website now as part of the application.
oh, okay.
Okay, so the PRC meetings are 2 weeks prior to an actual town planning board meeting.
So we're doing February 16th at 10.
Yes, at 10 a.m. So the next steps and deliverables is we'll refine these chapters?
Ashley, can I add one thing? I just had a thought. I know we digressed from the outline, but I just had a thought, and for consideration for everyone, that the outline and the graphics that Ashley showed are fantastic, fabulous. And then when she spoke about the land use recommendations, they're really detailed, and again speak to the depth that the comprehensive plan is going into. I was wondering if it might benefit, I think that when someone reads the document, to explain the process as well at the beginning of the and include that potentially as a chapter in the comprehensive plan. It could just be a summary of 5 to 6 pages that outlines the people-centric process that has been so important to Orangetown, and how you've been engaging everybody. I know there's a whole report and the survey that you did, and the online platforms that will obviously that report is probably best as a standalone, because it's a lot of
So we were planning on including
information.
that as an appendix, was the standalone report,
Right.
the appendix, and there already is in the introduction an overview of the process.
Okay, all right. Just wanted to say that, adding the outreach process gives it a little bit more, makes people understand how we came up with the all these recommendations, that it wasn't really done in a bubble.
Absolutely, and throughout the document, what we've heard is going to be reiterated. We're going to have, we're going to populate where appropriate some of those tables from the outreach report so that it's graphic. Absolutely.
Perfect, great. And we've been having these open meetings with everybody listening in. It's probably worth just noting that people have been part of this whole process all along.
Thank you. Sorry, so just to wrap, last thing was next step. So I'll circulate the memo that had all the zoning recommendations in it. If you all want to take a look, if you have any comments to send back. Otherwise, I took a lot of notes. And then as we refine these 2 first introduction chapters within the next 2 weeks or so, I should be able to circulate a draft.
Okay, sounds like a plan.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.